abordable, de l'épicerie abordable dans des communautés sécuritaires. On veut des meilleurs salaires. On veut un Canada qui est maître chez nous. On veut éliminer toutes les taxes sur la construction de logements, sur l'essence et la production de nourriture. Pour payer les factures et de nous permettre de réduire les déficits, l'inflation et les dettes, on veut couper la bureaucratie, les consultants, le BS coopératif, l'aide à l'étranger et les prestations pour des faux réfugiés. Notre mission, c'est de construire un Canada où le travail est récompensé et où la vie est abordable. Mais ça fait 11 ans des libéraux qui sont au pouvoir et les coûts augmentent toujours. Le panier d'épicerie, l'essence, le coût de logement, c'est le pire dans le G7. Tout coûte plus cher après 11 ans des libéraux. Les libéraux ont doublé la dette, doublé les files d'attente aux banques alimentaires et doublé le coût du logement. Avec les libéraux, on a la pire croissance économique dans le G7 depuis une décennie. M. Carney a appuyé toutes les politiques libérales qui ont causé cette hausse de coût de la vie. Mais pendant les dernières élections, il a promis de faire volte-face sur tout ce qu'il a dit et tout ce que son parti avait fait pendant 10 ans au pouvoir. Mais après un an, rien n'a changé, tout est pire. Avec Mark Carney, c'est plus de coûts, plus de crimes, plus de corruption et plus de la même chose. Mark Carney est juste un autre libéral. Les libéraux de Mark Carney, dans un an, ont doublé le déficit de Justin Trudeau. C'est incroyable. Le déficit de Trudeau est doublé par Mark Carney, un homme qui supposément connaît les finances. M. Carney nous a donné la pire inflation alimentaire dans le G7, le pire croissance économique dans le G7, le pire coût de logement et le pire endettement des ménages. Et malgré ces mauvais résultats, il y a quelques semaines, le premier ministre a dit que les Canadiens ont une abordabilité qui est son meilleure depuis une décennie. Regardons ses promesses. Il a promis de doubler la construction de logements, mais sa propre agence immobilière dit que ça va tomber de 18 %. Il a promis de construire plus vite que dans les générations. Mais un an plus tard, il n'y a pas de pipeline approuvée, il n'y a pas de tracé, pas d'investisseurs, pas de constructeurs, pas de permis, aucun progrès réel. Il avait promis de négocier une nouvelle entente avec les États-Unis avant le juillet 2025. Rien n'est arrivé. En fait, les tarifs américains ont doublé sur l'acier et l'aluminium et triplé sur le bois d'œuvre depuis que M. Carney est arrivé au pouvoir. Aucun résultat. Et aucun plan. C'est quoi le plan de Mark Carney sur la question de libre-échange avec les Américains? C'est quoi son goal, son but? Aidez-moi à comprendre quelque chose. Dimanche, il a publié une vidéo où il s'est comparé à un général du 19e siècle par rapport à une guerre avec les États-Unis. Mais aujourd'hui, il dit vouloir un partenariat avec les États-Unis. En dimanche, il a dit que l'échange avec les États-Unis, c'est une faiblesse. Aujourd'hui, il dit qu'on va avoir une belle entente. Il a dit qu'il veut une rupture avec les États-Unis. Ça veut dire quoi? La fin de l'ALENA? Totalement? C'est ça, une rupture. Il a dit que cette rupture devrait se faire, mais il a dit aujourd'hui que le Canada et les États-Unis sont plus forts ensemble. Ça, c'est dans la période de 4 jours, on voit une contradiction comme ça. J'aimerais bien poser cette question directement à M. Carney, mais il n'assiste pas aux périodes de questions. Je ne le blâme pas pour ça. Si j'avais ces résultats, je ne voulais pas non plus aller aux périodes de questions. Il veut éviter que la réalité entre en collision avec ses illusions. Il sait qu'il avait tort sur toutes les questions économiques depuis une décennie. Il avait tort sur la taxe carbone, sur les véhicules électriques, sur les pipelines, sur l'inflation pendant COVID, sur l'impression de l'argent, M. Carney a tort sur toutes les grandes questions de l'économie depuis une décennie, et c'est pour ça qu'il ne veut pas répondre aux questions. By contrast, now in English, we want, as Canadians, we want stronger take-home pay, safer streets, solid borders in a self-reliant Canada. We want to restore the promise of this country where anyone who works hard gets affordable food and homes, gets to live on a safe street and own a house. We want to free up money for this affordable Canada by cutting corporate welfare, bureaucracy, consultants, foreign aid, handouts to fake and phony refugees. All of this would help bring down deficits, taxes, and inflation. Our mission, again, is to restore the promise of this country that has been broken. After 11 years of Liberal governments, Canadians cannot afford housing, groceries, and gas. Liberals have doubled our debt, doubled food bank lineups, and doubled housing costs. They gave us the worst growth in the G7 over the last decade and the worst decade of economic growth in Canada's history. Mark Carney supported every single one of these costly, disastrous Liberal policies. And then in the last election, he promised to reverse everything he had said and that his party had done in the prior decade. Yet nothing has changed. Everything is worse. More crime, more cost, more corruption, more of the same. Mark Carney is just another Liberal. Carney Liberals have doubled Trudeau's deficit. This is amazing. No one thought it could get any worse than Justin Trudeau's deficits. Yet Carney's deficit is twice the size of Trudeau's, all because he's increased government spending by 7% year over year. He's added $90 billion of net new spending above and beyond his promised savings, two-thirds of which is going to day-to-day operations and not to capital investment. And C.D. Howe said today, Canada can no longer pride itself on fiscal discipline, end quote. Carney Liberals gave us the worst food inflation in the G7, and yet he had the audacity to claim in the House of Commons last week that affordability is at its best in a decade. Carney Liberals promised to double home building, while his housing agency says it will fall by 18%. Today, Carney was again spreading housing illusions, re-announcing an announcement he made back in December for projects that have still not got underway. All he has built is a new housing bureaucracy, a new agency in Ottawa to sop up tax dollars and block home building. More illusions. A year after Mark Carney promised to build at speeds not seen in generations, his promised pipeline to the Pacific has no permit, no route, no investor, no builder, no start date, no end date, and no oil to put in it. In fact, the only company that says they could potentially build that pipeline, Enbridge, says there won't be enough oil because the Liberal industrial carbon tax will prevent it from ever being produced. He's not negotiated a single free trade agreement. He broke his singular promise from the last election to negotiate a win with the United States by July of last year. Instead, he has done nothing while the Americans have doubled tariffs on aluminum, steel, and other products and tripled them on lumber. No one knows his plans or even his goals. Help me to understand this. Sunday, Mark Carney released a video comparing himself to Sir Isaac Brock, a 19th century war general who fought a war against the Americans. He said in that video that it is a weakness that we trade with the U.S. Today, he said we're stronger together with the Americans. He said recently that he wants a rupture with the U.S., and now he says he thinks we can get a mutually beneficial deal. These are contradictions all in the span of a few days. So which is it? Is it a rupture, or are we stronger together? And why is it that he contradicts himself so wildly? Is it because he doesn't know what he's doing from one day to the next? Or more likely, is it that he's using sensationalist words he does not mean to make headlines distracting from rising costs, crime, and corruption here at home in his own Liberal government? While he plays these games, there's one thing that is certainly rupturing: jobs. Almost a month ago, the U.S. slammed Canada with broadened tariffs. It will cost Windsor $1 billion alone. Yet the Prime Minister has not said or done a single thing about it. Zero, nothing. More ruptured jobs. He says he wants this rupture with the U.S. Does that mean he wants to pull out of the CUSMA? Because that's what a rupture would mean, unless the word was just a meaningless sensationalist slogan. Now, I would ask him that question directly in the House of Commons, but he won't show up for question period, because he knows that he and his agenda are nothing but a grand illusion. As soon as someone asks him a tough question, the illusion collides with reality. And the reality is that he's been wrong on every major economic issue of our time. He was wrong to support a bigger and broader carbon tax. He was wrong to support EV mandates, wrong to say we should keep 50% of our oil in the ground, wrong to support money printing during COVID, wrong to predict that COVID would lead to deflation rather than inflation, wrong on every major issue of our time, including the Indo-Pacific. One of Mr. Carney's most ridiculous illusions is around trade deals. He has not negotiated a single new free trade deal. And let me say that again. Mark Carney has not negotiated a single new free trade deal. He has signed 20 joint press releases with other countries, many countries that we already had trade deals with before. Nor has his major projects office approved a single major project that would allow us to send more resources to Asia. We need reality and not illusions. Under the previous Conservative government, we were able to sign new free trade deals with 50 countries, including Canada, South Korea. We were able to expand our trade into that region. But we must do better and we must do more, because our trade is still imbalanced with that region. Canada imports 25% of our merchandise imports from South Korea, from that region are coming into our country, but only 10% of our exports go in the other direction. We can do better. And that's why it's my pleasure to announce today that Shaq Howe, Member of Parliament, trade practitioner, and geopolitical expert, will serve as chair of the Conservative Party Pacific Gateway Economic Engagement Caucus with the following mandate: develop a comprehensive Conservative strategic plan for the Asia-Pacific, develop policy ideas for maximizing our exports to the region, including by approving pipelines and LNG plants, protect Canada's security interests, form a dedicated team of our Conservative shadow ministers to build out this policy, support planning for future Conservative missions to the Indo-Pacific, and publish his findings in a comprehensive report by the end of this year. Shaq Howe has a strong and consistent record in this area. He has led numerous cultural, strategic, and humanitarian missions to the region. He has engaged with China, Japan, Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, Cambodia, and Taiwan. He's also played a very important role in developing air links between Vancouver and the Far East to deepen economic and tourism ties. We look forward to your work, Shaq Howe, and congratulations. Another major issue in British Columbia is property rights and home ownership. The Cowichan Tribes versus Canada decision is a foundational shift in property rights for our country. It threatens home ownership of thousands of people by prioritizing Aboriginal title over private property rights. One company was unable to receive $100 million of financing recently because lenders were not sure of the collateral as a result of this ruling. If other groups making similar claims are successful in reaching the Cowichan threshold, it could threaten every single British Columbia homeowner, because there are claims on the entire province, and those claims are not ceded by treaties. The Liberals have worsened this problem by signing the Musqueam Rights Recognition Agreement in secret, without property rights protections, proper transparency, or consultation with other First Nations. That agreement covers 533,000 hectares of British Columbia territory, including Metro Vancouver and the Richmond lands at the centre of the Cowichan dispute. Mark Carney has failed in this area. He signed on to this agreement without protecting property rights, and two, he has kept in place a 2018 directive that forbids federal lawyers from defending property rights in the Cowichan appeal or anywhere else. This is a major failure of leadership. And by the way, where is Mark Carney on this? This is a federal lawsuit where the federal government is the defendant. And yet the federal prime minister has done and said nothing since August, while landowners don't know what their rights are, and many fear they're going to lose their homes. That is why we as Conservatives are stepping up to fill the void that Mark Carney has left. I'm announcing today that I will be naming Teiko Van Popta as the chair of the Conservative Task Force on Property Rights, with a particular focus on the Cowichan ruling, the Musqueam Agreement, and other Aboriginal title disputes and negotiations. In this role, he will examine and bring to light the extent to which recent legal interpretations and federal arguments have eroded property rights and reconciliation. He will explore legislative and constitutional options necessary to protect property rights and home ownership. He will also build out the existing Conservative policy on this, which includes putting property rights first in the Cowichan case by arguing that it has priority over all other titles and reversing the Liberal current position which directs lawyers not to defend property rights. He will also put forward the argument that no further treaties should be signed that do not include explicit property rights protections. We will also be pushing for a parliamentary committee to examine all of these matters on an urgent basis. As a real estate and land development lawyer for over 30 years and a director of the Surrey Board of Trade and the Downtown Surrey Business Improvement Area, no one is more qualified than Taco to take on this task. He's also a managing partner at a firm that he was at for decades before getting elected, which focuses on land-related legal matters in the Lower Mainland. And so congratulations, Taco. I know you'll do a great job. Again, our mission is a Canada where hard work pays off, where people have affordable food and homes, where young people can actually own homes, where our streets are safe, our economy is strong. We want a Canada with stronger take-home pay, safer streets, solid borders, in a self-reliant nation. Thank you very much.
On the question of the Canada-US deal, you've talked a lot about Canada needing to use its leverage. The provinces are using leverage by keeping American booze off the shelves. Do you think they should put it back on and remove this irritant that the U.S. has expressed?
Well, first of all, I think we should focus on the big question here, which is that after Mr. Carney squandered all of our leverage by making a whole series of upfront concessions and getting nothing in return while he dragged out the matter, we've seen the Americans double tariffs on steel and aluminum and triple them on lumber. So that is what happens when you squander leverage, as Mr. Carney has done. I don't think we should squander any more leverage after learning from Mr. Carney's mistakes. But let's also focus on the reality that we're talking about 2.6 million Canadian jobs that could be ruptured if we don't get this right. That is the big focus, and not whether I don't think we need to spend 3 or 4 days debating whether we should drink bourbon or not. I think we should discuss whether 2.6 million Canadians are going to have their jobs. And the way to get those jobs secured is to get a tariff-free trade deal with the U.S. I'm the only one, by the way, who's presented a plan to get such a tariff-free trade deal. We need to get it done.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Earlier last week, the Senate Human Rights Committee came up with a report on anti-Semitism. This was on Tuesday morning, where they recommended the reinstating of a position for the envoy of anti-Semitism, a position left vacant by Deborah Lyons last year. Tomorrow morning in Montreal, the government will announce $8.6 million of funding targeting the Black community and initiatives for the Black community across Canada. In the public sphere, we've spoken in the past against such initiatives targeting gender, race, or other groups. What do you make of it, and what's your current stance now?
I just think after 11 years of a liberal divisiveness where they separate people by race, ethnicity, gender, and every other possible dividing line, we've seen a more than 100% increase in hate-based violence. That continues under Mark Carney. What we need to do is actually lock up violent criminals who carry out the violence in the first place, stop terrorists and criminals from coming to our country through what are now open and porous borders. And we need to start treating every Canadian as an individual, not judging them based on the race, the ethnicity, or the gender. We treat everybody based on their Canadian personal characteristics of hard work, decency, and patriotism. By the way, I just realized I just made a mistake. I made a mistake. I was supposed to let my members have a quick word here. I will take all your questions, though. I just wanted to, there you go. Yeah. There you go.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chuck Gao, MP for Richmond Centre Marlborough Riding. I'm both honored and humbled by the assignment. This is a huge and important task. But fortunately, we are building on the strong conservative record on trade expansion and diversification. As mentioned, during the time when Mr. Harper was the Prime Minister, Canada's trade agreement with other countries increased from 5 to 50. So we are building on this track record. In the weeks to come, I will be working with my colleagues and in consultation with the stakeholders to develop a policy framework, a plan, and an implementation strategy for us to move Canada's economy forward. Thank you.
Good, thank you. I'm very pleased that the Conservative Party, under the leadership of Mr. Poilievre, is taking a very clear and strong stance on private property rights. I spent my career as a real estate development lawyer taking indefeasible title to the bank. We always thought that private property rights were rock solid, sacrosanct, never to be messed with. What the title says, the title is. This is one of the principles on which our modern economy is established. Yet today, that has now been called into question. We are all very shocked at the Supreme Court of British Columbia decision in the Cowichan Tribes case, where for the first time in Canadian history, a court declared Aboriginal title on privately held lands. That's never been done before. It is not necessary for reconciliation. It puts reconciliation in the wrong direction, and I'm very pleased that this task force has now been tasked with coming up with solutions, coming up with recommendations, coming up with good policies to protect private property rights. Thank you.
You guys are a very excitable bunch today. Wow.
Qui ne sont pas nécessairement appréciés de la part de vos collègues du Bloc québécois et de certains Québécois en général, notamment sur la gestion de l'offre. Et récemment, il vient d'envoyer une invitation en anglais seulement. Est-ce qu'il doit être rappelé à l'ordre?
Oui, absolument. En fait, pour être vraiment bilingue et pour respecter nos deux langues officielles, il faut dire que M. Wiseman n'est pas un homme sage. En réalité, il a dit qu'on devrait avoir 100 millions de nouveaux immigrants. Il a insulté le Québec et maintenant il fait des invitations dans seulement une langue officielle. C'est un manque de respect pour la langue française et ça remet en question l'engagement de M. Carney de protéger les intérêts des Québécois et des francophones dans les négociations avec les États-Unis.
I just want to clarify. Should Premier...
Tariffs are the starting point for any conversations with the Americans. Is it worth going forward and baking in those tariffs for another 5-year period?
I don't understand the question.
The Americans have made clear that tariffs are the baseline for any trade agreement they sign with any partner nation, friendly or not. Is it worthwhile for Canada to go into those negotiations if tariffs are a starting point? Are the entry fee to getting a new CUSMA, is it worth going into those negotiations?
Well, I understood from the Prime Minister's remarks that he said today there wasn't an entry fee. So I don't know if you heard that.
The Americans keep saying that tariffs are a prerequisite for any deal, and all of their previous deals have included tariffs. Do you think you could get a deal that does not include tariffs?
Yes. And I've already presented my plan on that. You build up your leverage, and you make it clear that the Americans only get what they want if we get what we want. What do they want? They've made it very clear. They need critical minerals. We have 10 of the 12 NATO-defined critical minerals that are necessary to fight a modern war. We have the aluminum that goes into fighter jets. We have the tungsten that goes into armor-piercing equipment. We have the germanium that goes into night vision technology. The list goes on. What I've said is we would fashion a strategic reserve of those minerals plus oil, and we would make it legally available at market rates to countries that have tariff-free trade with us so that they would have the security that, God forbid, if we go into a war, they can arm themselves. I would also put forward an auto plan that has a formula to massively increase production in Canada and in the United States, which is the opposite of what's happening in both countries right now. The Americans are losing auto production because there's a terrible trade formula. I put forward a formula that will make the Americans and the Canadians produce more automobiles, which means that both of us get what we want. I've published these plans in painstaking detail. And by the way, I haven't seen anything analogous from Mark Carney, who's been Prime Minister for a year and who was elected because we were told he knew how to negotiate these things. So it seems like Mark Carney has waved the white flag and accepted permanent job-destroying tariffs on aluminum, steel, autos, and lumber. And that will mean a massive rupture of jobs. He wants to rupture jobs. I want tariff-free trade.
You said that you don't think we should spend the next 3 or 4 days debating around whether we should be drinking bourbon or not. I just want to clarify, does that mean you think it's time for premiers to put American booze back on the shelves?
No, I haven't said that.
But what is you think you're fine with the premiers keeping the American booze off the shelves?
Sure. at the end of the day, we're talking about my point is, we're talking about a $700 billion, nearly $1 trillion trade deal, okay? So what I'm saying is, let's get focused on the real issue, which is that a fifth of our economy depends on this trade relationship. We need to focus on the real issues of getting tariffs removed on steel, aluminum, lumber, and autos, and getting back to tariff-free trade. That's what our focus should be, and I think the Prime Minister should get away from all of the theatrics, the YouTube videos, and the distractions, and tell us how he's going to achieve that.
What do you think of the Ethics Committee recommendation that the Prime Minister should have to sell their portfolio since a blind trust is not true divestment?
I agree. I mean, we've never seen a Prime Minister so conflicted as Mark Carney. He has ownership of a company that has been described as Canada's single biggest tax dodger. So how is it that he could possibly pass a budget or another amendment to the Income Tax Act in the interests of Canada when he knows that his personal financial interests depend on offshore tax havens that come at the expense of the Canadian people? He has Brookfield sitting at the table when his ministers are negotiating in China. Who's he negotiating for, Brookfield or Canadians? I mean, frankly, I have to be honest, I am stunned by how little scrutiny there has been of his personal financial interests and how they run in direct opposition to the national interests of this country. And I'm also stunned that the Prime Minister has used legalese to try and keep profiting himself at the expense of the public interest, rather than doing the honorable thing, which is to divest himself completely, sell all of his assets, and put it into a fully blind trust.
Or have you asked for a meeting with Ambassador
I have met with
Wiseman?
him, yes.
And did you brief him on your meetings in the United States?
I didn't brief him on that. I have briefed the Prime Minister. He and I had a very long conversation after I returned. But I'm happy to chat with the ambassador anytime.
Sur la gestion de l'offre, vous avez suggéré tantôt que votre plan, ce serait de concéder aux Américains certaines choses qu'ils veulent. Les Américains ont mis ça très clair.
Je n'ai pas dit ça.
Vous avez parlé des ressources, etc.
Mais des ressources, j'ai parlé de levier de négociation.
C'est très clair que les Américains veulent la gestion de l'offre canadienne, veulent s'y attaquer.
Je ne suis pas ici pour donner aux Américains tout ce qu'ils veulent. Je suis ici pour donner des choses qui sont dans les intérêts du Canada. C'est dans nos intérêts de vendre nos ressources. Ça donne des plus grands chèques de paie, un dollar plus fort, un pouvoir d'achat plus grand. Donc, c'est ça l'approche que je prendrais.
C'est mieux pas d'entente qu'une mauvaise entente. Une entente, autrement dit, qui braderait la gestion de l'offre, la culture québécoise. Ou est-ce qu'on pourrait juste rester comme ça? La COM va continuer là, si on n'a pas d'entente.
Rester comme quoi? Juste l'actuel, c'est on a une mauvaise entente maintenant. Une mauvaise entente avec des tarifs sur le bois d'œuvre et l'aluminium de nos amis au Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean. Ça, c'est une très mauvaise situation. Des tarifs sur les autos qui vont éliminer notre secteur automobile si on les enlève pas. Donc, on a une très mauvaise entente maintenant et il faut renverser ça avec une entente de libre-échange.
The Conservatives could lose their official status in the Senate by the end of next year. Would you call on the Prime Minister to appoint more Conservative senators?
I think he should do that. I don't think that the Senate is not currently a reflection of the Canadian people. 41% of Canadians, a record number for 40 years, voted Conservative in the last election. That's well over 8 million Canadians. Again, a record-smashing number. And that should be reflected in both chambers.
Do you think the Prime Minister
publicize your strategy of what you think the negotiations with the United States should look like? Are you telling us that you believe the Canadian government should publish
nos demandes, mais en général, on veut une réduction dans le coût de la vie et nous croyons que ça arrive avec la réduction des coûts du gouvernement. Il faut vraiment couper le coût du gouvernement qui a explosé depuis l'arrivée au pouvoir de M. Carney. C'est-à-dire couper la bureaucratie, les consultants, le BS coopératif, l'aide à l'étranger, les prestations aux faux réfugiés pour réduire l'inflation, les taxes et les dettes. Celles sont les priorités conservatrices de longue date et ça continue. Je vais avoir plus de spécifiques dans une lettre qu'on va publier pendant la fin de semaine. Merci.
To that end, would you support, in the meantime, more bailouts for the sectors affected by, like, say, the 232 tariffs. You reference, for example, the mold makers in Windsor who are seeing their costs be jacked up. Accepting that trade deals do take a long time to negotiate, these tariffs will not be lifted overnight. What is the today response that you think is feasible in the context of the deficit and government spending?
Look, we'll have to look at everything on a case-by-case basis, but we cannot build an economy on bailouts alone. Every time we're forced to do a bailout, ultimately what happens is you're taking money from every other industry and concentrating it in one industry, albeit a deserving one. So a bailout economy means that every day we're getting poorer. What we need is an open, free enterprise economy with low taxes, fast permits, and international free trade. That's how we create a productive paycheck economy.
What happens if the president is just acting irrationally? I mean, the things you've described are rational, right? Critical minerals, tariff-free autos. The Americans have said they're going to find their critical minerals elsewhere and that they're going to make all their cars at home. What happens if this is just a pathological desire for tariffs? What does Canada do in that situation?
We have to focus on what we can control. Nobody can control President Trump. After running an entire election on controlling Trump, Prime Minister Carney went on to admit that he can't control them at all. What we can control is the things we do here at home. We repeal the anti-development laws to get our mines digging to accumulate those critical minerals. The Americans need those minerals, and they can't get them anywhere else. You know, President Trump's voters who drive pickup trucks are paying effectively a tax on the Ford F-150 because it's made out of Canadian aluminum. You cannot make a Ford F-150 without Canadian aluminum. It is the tariff on the aluminum is a tax on the Ford F-150, the single most popular truck in America for 40 years. We can use that as leverage. I've also gone to spoken to the Americans in my speech in Detroit to the American people about how we can have a tariff-free auto pack. He wants to have manufacturing jobs back in America. Let's sign on to an auto pack that's bigger and better than the 1965 auto pack. He gets more auto production, but we get more auto production. So let's focus on what we can control here at home, and that is the best chance we have of getting tariff-free trade abroad. All right, thanks very much, everyone. I've got to go. Thank you.